All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for the Empirical Enlightenment podcast. I'm here with Jose. He's a doctor of Chinese energetic medicine. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Awesome. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Qigong. I assume I'm pronouncing that not even close to correct, but
No, your pronunciation is actually very spot on.
pretty spot on. Oh, okay. It's not as hard as I had anticipated.
No, but you'd be surprised because of the writing system when they took the Chinese characters and they were transcribing them into the Latin alphabet. A couple different systems came about from that. The predominant one is Pinyin, but sometimes you'll see it written as Qigong. Sometimes you'll see it written as Qigong or Qigong.
Qigong.
So, yeah. But the most
Oh, that's
common
interesting.
pronunciation is Qigong.
Qigong. Okay. Yeah, I actually speak Japanese, and so I looked at the characters. It's a little different because obviously Chinese and Japanese characters don't always overlap, but it's basically to work energy. Is that correct? So like it's ki or chi, which is energy, and then to work, right?
Mhm.
So you're kind of like using that energy in your body. Is that an accurate description, or am I
100%. So let me
100%?
relate
Okay.
this in a different way. Most people are familiar with the term kung fu.
Yeah.
Kung fu uses the same character as qigong in the ending, but the pronunciation is different. See, as we said, the pronunciation, yeah? But kung fu means hard work, is what it relates to.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
qigong means energy work. So it's the skill of working with the life force energy.
With the life force energy.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's funny how these with these East Asian words, they're a lot more simple than you'd think. Like karate is empty hand, right? So
Right.
it's like it's weaponless fighting. So
Hmm.
it's right there in the name. It's kind of like French, where they say the basically exactly what it is. We look at it and we think it's this abstract,
Yeah.
crazy, metaphysical thought or whatever, but it's literally just writing the word like what it is.
Yeah.
So they're not trying to be too mysterious with it. So tell me a little bit about chi. I'm really curious about it. I just what I know about it, which is basically nothing. But I was reading this paper in Nature, actually. So you guys are getting mad respect these days. But it talked about these two different doctors. I don't remember the name, so I'm not going to be able to pronounce it properly. I'll put a link in the YouTube description so people can check it out. But they were basically trying to unveil what these two Chinese doctors were doing with these different medicines,
Mhm.
what qi is as it relates to the blood and what metabolic pathways and all that stuff. And no, they were really convincing, and it sounds like this ancient medicine, they were onto something. And I'm sure as science gets more sophisticated, we'll get a better understanding of what they were doing. But yeah, sorry, I know I asked you the question and then I answered it myself, but
That's good.
no, please can you give a description
Yeah.
of what chi is and how we work it?
Well, it's interesting because chi, in and of itself, when we hear the word in the or with the Western mind, Western concept, we think it's a one type thing that's all encompassing. Chi technically is a bit of a category. So when we talk about chi and we talk about it as energy, it's like which chi are you referring to? Because there's the chi of the blood, there's the chi in the air, there's the Wei Qi also, and Wei Qi is considered to be this sort of protective aura, if you will. It's like the different energetic fields that hang outside, of which the aura would be considered one.
Hmm.
And so there's different divisions as to how the Qi manifests, but Qi as an overarching thing, you could say is a moldable substance that exists outside and inside of you. It's responsible for animating the tissues within you, as well as animating all of those things outside of you.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, in my research, I noticed there's something called meridians.
Hmm.
I don't know. You can go a little bit into that, but I was like, you know what that sounds like? is metachlorians from Star Wars. Joe's
Hmm.
George Lucas totally stole that. He like just
Well,
ripped that straight out of Chinese chi, and the
uh,
Force, sounds exactly like chi. And I'm sure you've probably come across that before, but that's exactly what's going on there with Star Wars. But no, it's really interesting. I think with some of the ancients, they noticed things and they did their best to explain it. And they came up with these really interesting theories. And rudimentary science can't prove them. But as science advances, usually it's like, oh, like I see. So I don't know if you're familiar with Lamarck. He's that evolutionary scientist who was laughed at for a long time for saying that um, organisms based on their life can modify their offspring, which is totally different from natural selection,
mhm.
which is, straight up DNA, pass on your genes, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, yeah.
decades later, he was proven to be right with epigenetics, this code on top of the code type thing, which basically showed that what you do in life um, echoes through eternity, to quote the Gladiator. But it literally does. Like, what you do in life affects how your offspring will be. And it's not just straight up natural selection, it's you're imprinting things that um, you've experienced on your germline and then passing on to your kids. But
Right.
anyway, the reason I bring that up is a lot of this stuff, it's observable in a sense, but it's not provable. And you can talk a little bit more about what stuff is in chi is provable, but it's something that people feel. It's like metaphysical almost. But when instrumentation and science gets a little bit more advanced, a lot of this stuff is like, aha, oh, that's what they were talking about. It is a real thing. Maybe it's not observable right now, but it's definitely something you can feel. Like, you can feel people's aura, their negative energy, or whatever like that. If I'm incorrect here, let me know. But yeah, I think that's probably what's starting to happen with this chi stuff, where papers are coming out, which is like, yeah, this is what they were talking about. It's these different metabolic pathways in the body, and different energies, and maybe it's bioelectricity, which is another thing that's really started to take off. We've got these electrical signals going through our body, which kind of decide, you know, what genes get expressed, and what grows where, and that kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
anyway, is there? I mean, you're a doctor of it, so I guess I'm talking to the right guy. But as far as like the science behind it, what is kind of the main science behind chi? Is it metabolism? Is it what to my Western mind?
Hmm.
What could you relate it to?
Well, when we're talking about chi, because it seems to be such a subtle, ethereal body, yeah, we're trying to, in the Western sphere, look at it through the physicality of it. How does it
Yeah.
represent itself in the physical plane? So there's three levels to everything. There's the physical level, there's the
Hmm.
energetic level, which is where chi lies, and then there's the
Okay.
spiritual level. So to put it a
Okay.
different way, we could say it in the West that this would be your mind, your soul, and your body. Because when you look at, for example, Christianity, within Christian thought, the soul is what's responsible for animating the body. In essence, it's what fulfills the function of chi, animating the body.
Yeah.
Mind, because of the thoughts and the intentions, is thus able to lead that chi down your arm so that you reach out, grasp a cup, and bring it to yourself. And so it manifests from the top down in that order. Now, when we're looking at it and we're trying to find where's the physicality of it, right? There's some telltale markers that have been seen. There was a lot of research that was done in China prior to the 2000s, and then all the clinics were closed down. Unfortunately, it was not a good thing when that happened. But they had tons of research there, but their research was focused mainly on the medical aspect. However, If you've ever heard of the placebo effect,
Yeah.
the placebo effect plays a bit of a role into one way that we could measure those changes. Because, like I mentioned, when you're looking at the mind leading the chi to then affect the physical body, if someone's in a double blind trial and they're receiving a pill and they actually believe that it's going to do the intended effects, then we see those effects manifesting in the physical body.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, my background's in pharmacology, so no, placebo effect is actually a key component of,
mhm.
especially in antidepressants and stuff. But sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. But so that's sort of how this manifests and works. So we can't really rely just on the physical levels. We would have to look at two levels to really try to determine what's going on. Because when you look at the Chinese medical theory, hormones were not considered to be a thing. They worked
Yeah.
primarily with the organs. We knew the organs. They didn't really know about the hormones. But regardless of that, they're still able to dictate and talk about how the body functions and even the effects that will be happening downstream.
Yeah.
Let me give you another interesting example. There was a study that came out a while back that was talking about the reaction speed of people to a specific stimuli. Okay, whether that's them actually going through a particular movement pattern that they've ingrained in themselves, or whether it was a reaction to, say, heat on the skin from a hot pot or something. And what they got confused about was that the speed of the signal that was being sent to move and react in accordance to that stimulus was quicker than it would take for the signal to reach the brain and the brain to send the signal back down. So, in essence, what they were talking about is saying that maybe there's some sort of different brain into the nervous system that develops through to allow you to do these things, something that's really ingrained in you. But if we're
Oh,
talking
that's
about,
fascinating.
yeah, if we're talking about how the mind will lead the chi and the chi will lead the body, then in that example, it makes sense because as soon as that happens, the thought and intentions immediately recognize that and you're able to then pull back.
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah, that kind of reminds me of The Matrix, where
Hmm.
not to quote too many movies, but it's like it's you need to think you can do it. And what's interesting about that, I actually know quite a bit about the placebo effect. We studied it quite a bit in my pharmacology classes, but no, it's more than just thinking that oh, it's working, and so you get those benefits. It's actually without the placebo effect, whatever drug or whatever it is you're taking won't work as well, which is crazy, right? So basically, the cortisol goes down, the vasculature opens up, you enter into kind of a more anabolic state where you can build up and use the drugs. But without that, the drugs don't work as well. So it's kind of funny. Like it really throws a wrench in research because it's really hard to account for that because it's kind of a mysterious thing. But it's literally, if you have the placebo effect, it also makes the drug work better. It's not just
Hmm.
the placebo effect that it's like, oh, I feel happy, so my stress levels are lower, so my gut doesn't hurt as bad and stuff like
Right.
that. It's like, no, the drug doesn't work as well unless you think it's going to work, which is crazy. It's the same thing with a lot of these spiritual experiences, I think, too, where um, the participants are getting a lot more out of it because they believe it's going to work, and it's opening up their mind and their heart and that kind of thing. And so I don't know if that's what's going on with Qigong, but it sounds like it. It's basically like it's not going to work unless you open your mind and think that it will work. And so
Hmm.
it's kind of I, man, I forget the word of it. I think it's called open placebo, but it's basically like the placebo effect is necessary, and so you force yourself to accept it and believe it, and then it works, right? So that might be what's going on with qigong and this soul thing. Just like I said, I'm no expert on it, but I think um, that's how it is with a lot of these spiritual practices, is
Right.
where it's not just a matter of, oh, I feel good because I believe this. Literally, it won't work. And like your mind won't open up. Literally, like the vasculature in your brain kind of expands, and it's like, oh, I know this is good. I know this is worthwhile. So I'm going to receive it, accept it, and then use it. So
Think of it a little bit like a bias. If I'm a scientist and I begin to make an observation, then I want to go test it. But in order for me to actually agree with the conclusion, I have to be open to whatever the outcome is. Maybe my hypothesis is wrong. Maybe I am right. But the moment that we get into that zone of, I think this is it, and I'm convinced this is it, if the results come and contradict that, we simply say the study was bad and toss it out.
yeah,
And so a lot of this, exactly what you're talking about, comes down to a matter of, like you're saying, receptiveness, trust, and relaxation. So in Qigong, when we're doing these movements, when we're doing these patterns, when we're doing this work, it allows us to relax. We relax mentally, we relax the body. Qi has an intelligence in and of itself. It knows what needs to be done and where it needs to go. But if we're too tense and not allowing it, then we hinder it. We ourselves cause the problem. So if you allow yourself to relax and trust into it, then that's what allows the chi to flow. It's no different than with the placebo effect, that you need to have the placebo effect even when it is the pill, because those people
yeah,
have to be relaxed enough to say, I trust in the authority of these people that are administering this to me, that this will work. I trust in their expertise, and I will allow this to happen.
yeah, yeah. This is kind of a strange question, and maybe a bit too metaphysical, but I wonder if some of these ancients or even modern people, they know that, right? They're afraid to talk about it, talk about how the placebo effect is necessary. I don't know if placebo effect is the right word, but basically you have to believe it will work, or you have to open your mind for these things to actually work. However, it's a bit of a paradox because, like I said, there's open placebo where it's true and there is still effectiveness to it. But I wonder if some of these people worried that if they tell people that the placebo is necessary, or you have to open your mind or free your mind or whatever, then they'll be like, well, that's nonsense then. And so they went to the point where they left that part out, and they were saying, oh, let's just tell them that this is true, and then they'll take it on face value, and then they can skip that middleman placebo effect and actually get the benefits without needing the placebo. Do you kind of get what I'm saying? Like they
I get what you're
hit
saying.
it on purpose.
I get what you're saying, but it's more of, the secret is this. The secret is that you need to be relaxed, willing, and accepting. You need to be okay with being vulnerable
Yeah,
for whatever it is to work through you and in you. And so in those situations, there's some methods, there's some schools of instruction that they would tell you, go do this to gather up more chi. But realistically, the whole purpose of doing that for 2, 3 hours was to get you tired so that you could actually let yourself get out of the way and learn the practice or do the thing and let whatever needs to happen happen, because it needed to be a relaxation, let go, vulnerability type thing. And so it's the same in these situations. If I go and I'm part of a clinical trial and I don't believe it's going to work because it's a clinical trial, even if I get the true medication, then
yeah,
that impacts me. I'm not fully relaxed. And as you said, like, my vessels are not open, right? My cortisol's too high. And so the intended effects will not occur, as opposed to someone that does fully let go, releases, and allows whatever happens to happen in that situation. So I don't think it's so much a that they hit it on purpose, but more so that the answer's too obvious and people aren't going to believe us. So let's just give them something cool instead.
I see. So they're kind of hacking human nature or whatever. That's, I guess, in a way, that's ultimate wisdom. To understand the limitations of the human heart and the human mind and the human body, and find a way to outsmart it, more or less, because in the end we're frail animals, and sometimes you need a hack or a workaround or whatever to really get the results that we need, especially if there's some kind of mental block or trauma, or I don't know, something else going on where a direct approach, ironically, will not work. You need to take a side route. Yeah, this is very Eastern thought and Eastern
Mhm.
medicine, and I love it. This is really cool. It's something that so me, I haven't learned too much about it. I lived in Japan for a couple of years, but I was there as a Christian missionary, so
Ah, I see.
I was doing the opposite of Eastern medicine stuff. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's interesting. That's the case. So like what you were saying with, you have to let it flow, accept it, let it ride. That's definitely the case with a lot of these other practices as well, whether it's meditation or breath work or psychotropics or something like that. The more you fight it, the worse it gets, right? So you just have to kind of let the emotions flow, let the chi flow, I
Mhm.
guess, in this circumstance, and that's when you get the true benefits of it. You know. So can you talk a little bit about the movements in qigong? Like, I know it's related to tai chi, but
Right.
tai chi is more the fighting version of qigong that you kind of explained a little bit to me. So can you explain exactly what the movements and
Sure.
meditations are in qigong, and what the benefits are?
Now, when we're talking about Qigong Tai Chi, Qigong being the grandfather of Tai Chi, it led to Tai Chi. But Tai Chi is
Okay.
more, as you mentioned, it's more of a martial aspect. In Qigong, we focus on the meditative aspects, we focus on the spiritual aspects. Tai Chi is fighting based and movement based, but it can also have and carry those same meditative qualities to it. The major difference being that you cannot necessarily fight with the Qigong movements. So, in effort, what we're doing with both do a similar thing. But what we're doing with both is remember, I gave you the structure that the mind leads the chi and the chi leads the body, but it could also work in reverse. As we work with the physical body, we can then animate whatever is stuck in a sense and have that come up and out and move out from the body. Now, although you have things like cardiac output where everybody circulates a certain amount of blood per minute, I think the range is 2 to 4, depending on body mass, 2 to 4 liters a minute. But you still have to account for vessel dilation and vessel contraction. So when you include physical movement into your practice, say even just walking, what you're doing is you're helping to circulate the blood further. Now, if you've ever had a knot, you know that within a knot, because of the buildup of pressure, blood stasis tends to occur. It's not necessarily stopped, but blood moves through it slowly. And if blood's responsible for delivering nutrition and taking out toxins, then what happens is you begin to have an accumulation of things there as the cells are trying to dump everything out into the knot, but the blood's not flowing adequately enough to take it out. So it just sits there. Now, as we start working with the Qigong and the Tai Chi, one of the major things we're doing is we're stretching the fascial system. Okay, the fascial
Yeah.
being what bundles around the muscles.
Yeah.
Now, inherent within the fascia, as we're doing that, those same meridians that we spoke about, which tend to be the energies and pathways for the chi, they expand wide open to allow more to flow through. So what we're doing is as we're manipulating this and manipulating the tissue, that knot starts to get worked, that knot starts to get loosened, and all of
Mm.
that accumulation begins to come out and move on. And so this is another way that we sort of affect the mind, chi, and body process, but in reverse. Okay, because now since we've done that, now we're opening the pathways and allowing the chi to come and flow through, allowing the blood to come and flow through, allowing what needs to be eliminated, and allowing what needs to come in to come in. So regardless of whatever style of qigong or tai chi you're doing, they all have that same benefit.
Interesting. So it's kind of like relaxing those pathways and allowing them to flow through your body, which is,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
one way. It's also like a self massage in a sense because anytime you contract and relax a muscle, it's similar to when you get pressure from a massage.
Yeah.
Because at the same
I
time,
see.
even with Qigong or Tai Chi, one of the other things that gets done is the internal organs also get massaged. Because when you think about diaphragmatic breathing, when you actually breathe with your diaphragm, that arch that comes down, it compresses all the organs that you have internally underneath it. As you're doing that, of course, it's also extending and stretching the lungs, extending and pulling down on the heart. That's part of the way that it gets blood flow up there is through that cardiothoracic pump. But as you're doing that, you're basically massaging the organs and also forcing, in a sense, because now you're increasing the pressure, forcing the blood to perfuse through the organs as well. And so, in the same way, you're also massaging the internal organs, you're massaging the fascial tissues, and you're just creating more flow, more space in the body.
I see. So how do you do that exactly? So is it like I mean, the only images I have is like a woman in a park, doing like this and
Right.
stuff like that. But what if you could give a brief, so people listening can get a brief picture of what you're talking about. How do you do that? Is it certain movements? Are you pushing up against your body, breathing? I mean, you talked about the diaphragmatic breathing, but yeah, how do you do that?
So the movements are designed to work specific tissues, specific organs through
Okay,
that pattern. So a very simple thing is if everybody was standing up and you extend your arms straight up overhead into a stretch. In essence, what you're doing is all the meridians along the sides here are now being stretched. Now, if you tilt to one side as you do that, what you're in effect doing is you're compressing the organs on one side physically, and then you're stretching the organs on the other side. And so there's one qigong form where what they do in effort is they reach up with one side first, come down, reach up with the other side, come down, reach up with both, and come down.
that's
Um,
cool.
so that's like a basic way for you to understand. It's that stretch of the tissues and that compression of the organs as well.
I see. So I definitely should have looked into this more, but are there a lot of published papers that kind of discuss the physiological benefits to Tai Chi, or is it mostly something that's kind of kept over in China, or what's the status on that? Just
Well, I'm
curious.
glad you did mention that. There are some studies that talk about it. Of course, they're all small studies.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think the biggest one I saw was 40 people, 40 people, and in a lot of them
it's not bad.
they measured cortisol in one. They also measured subjective things such as their sleep score. I forget the exact. They used two different scales for the sleep score. I forget, like BDI, I think was one maybe. But
Hmm.
in essence, they had objective and subjective measurements to that.
Okay,
And so they
cool,
wanted to see what happens when one of the studies was before Qigong, during the practice, 20 minutes in or 30 minutes in, and then afterwards, what were the difference in blood markers.
cool.
So for the few studies that I was able to find and are accessible online, they do show that there is a decrease in cortisol post
Mm,
training. And they show that subjectively, depression scores are better, sleep scores are better.
yeah.
And also, one of the studies did showcase that there was a elevation of endorphins during practice as
Oh,
well.
wow.
And typically, qigong is not necessarily a strenuous thing. You're not really working very hard like you would be running or lifting weights, but it was enough to produce the endorphins and that feel good that comes with it as well.
That's really cool. So you mentioned a lot of these places closed down. Was that during the Great Leap Forward in China? Where is that? Did they get rid
No,
of all that? No.
well, unfortunately, it wasn't during the Great Leap Forward, but it was in the early 2000s,
Oh,
and not to talk too much about it because I don't want to throw shade necessarily, but
don't want to upset people. No, you
there's
just the facts. You don't have to blame
yeah,
anybody,
there's
but
one
yeah.
particular group that was very militant about it because the
Uh,
thing is, we had medical qigong clinics. Qigong was done on all the corners of every park. Anywhere you went, you could find someone. My
yeah.
instructor would always say that they had cancer clinics, and each cancer clinic would divide people depending on where their cancer was to go join these groups. And these
Well,
groups,
that's
they would
cool.
do all these different exercises and marching with all these banners and these drums. Like it was great.
Yeah.
So they were very, very pro Qigong because after Mao took over, then what they did is they kind of accumulated some of the stuff that now formulates TCM, and they were really trying to go through a rigorous process of testing it and showing its efficacy in the Western way. So
Oh.
Qigong was also heading that way. But the problem is when this group came in who was very militant and adamant about not just Qigong, but also about the government, then everything got shut down because they immediately associated, well, Qigong with this group. So anybody that was doing it kind of,
Oh no.
yeah, they kind of shut it away. And it was one of those things where they would say, "Do you practice Qigong?" And you would say, "No, sir, that would be illegal
In China,
in China."
right? Or
Yeah.
okay, yeah. What was that group? I guess you're deliberately not saying it was like a cultish group, right? Or
Yeah,
they were claimed to be.
they're still
Um,
around. There's
oh, really? I can
they
look
are
that up
cultic.
later. Was
It's
that the
just
group that the Chinese government were really going after? It's not necessarily they were a cult, but the Chinese government thought that they were a seditionist or something like that.
it
And
is
so,
related to that. Yeah, it's just
okay.
the material they teach, their Qigong system. It's very simple, and as far as I've been told, it works great. The problem is everything else that's tied alongside it is questionable.
Oh, I see.
So that's why it's
Okay.
like it is kind of cultish.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You're not going to tell me the name, are you? Are
I'd
you?
rather not know.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I can look it up later, the viewers, because it's in the tip of my mind. But no, that's interesting. Yeah, it sounds like it falls along. Sounds like qigong kind of falls along the same lines of religions and spirituality, where eventually some person ends up taking it and abusing it because it's such a powerful tool. They can do bad things with it. But you're not saying this; these particular groups did bad things with it, but maybe maybe some people viewed that they were doing bad things with it or something like that.
Well,
Because yeah,
the thing about spiritual work is that there needs to be a connection to something bigger than yourself, something higher. Because
yeah,
a good teacher will always tell whomever's learning under them that, hey, it's not about me. Everybody's able to do this. It's about you and your connection with something beyond you. The moment they start saying it's about me, that's an issue. And that's what
yeah.
tends to happen with a lot of these practices is the head person will say it's about me because they're either hiding from something or refusing to do something, and that's what kind of gives a lot of these things a bad name.
Yeah, yeah. It's the human nature in us. I think eventually someone's going to come along and take charge, and um, even though it started with the best of intentions, I'm not saying that happened with this group, but it happens a lot. It always seems to. There's always ends up being there's something good, something pure, something started with the best of intentions, and if it's powerful, then usually somebody will come along. Usually, some kind of sociopath who will come in and start sleeping with everybody's wives or something along those lines,
Hmm.
where they take over and corrupt it and use that energy. um, my ancestry is Mormon,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of offshoots of the Mormon Church
Right.
where, yeah, they um, took that those good teachings, some of the initial teachings, and then they went off and yeah, started sleeping with everybody's wives and people's daughters, and they used it as an opportunity to do bad stuff. So I know that happens with a lot of groups, right? It's just unfortunate that
Hmm.
um, these powerful tools that our innate need for spirituality and our innate need for connection, people can take advantage of pretty easily. Once they get in there and start messing with people. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's so these tools exist everywhere. every culture has their own set of tools, and for the most part, everybody does and seeks to do the same things. You know, a
Yeah.
lot of them seek union with the divine, for example. A lot of them will work in a similar manner. We'll all do the same sort of stuff. It's just a different flavor. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to equate it to everybody may eat chicken, but how they flavor their chicken is different.
Yeah. 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 I'm really curious what kind of science is going to come out on this stuff as things progress, because the metaphysical is really hard to quantify and explain. And the biggest problem is, I think it's right up there with nutrition, because every person is so different, and by design or evolution or whatever you want to call it, homologous recombination. Every time we mate, we create a completely different person
Yeah.
who took millions or billions of years to come together. This hodgepodge of genes, and biological systems, they're just haphazardly thrown together through evolution or whatever. And all sorts of weird compensatory mechanisms and things going on. So anyway, the point I'm trying to get at is everybody is very, very, very different. And so a lot of this metaphysical stuff might affect one person differently than another, and I wonder if going forward there's maybe going to be some genetic aspect to it, epigenetic aspect to it, where you can kind of tell based on a person's genetic profile, how spiritual they are, how in touch with these life forces they are, and that kind of stuff. That would be my guess, because it's interesting. I know a lot of people who grew up in the same background as me, same
Hmm.
family, same whatever, and they believe something entirely different. They have a
Right.
totally different view on spirituality and that kind of stuff. And I've thought a lot about that, and I wonder what part of it is genetic. you know i think
Yeah.
there's definitely some part of us that there's some of us who are much more willing to uh, believe in the placebo effect or whatever, and open our minds and realize that that's a necessary thing, and other people just shut it off and say, no, that's, you're trying to trick me, or or something like that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, a lot of it, I guess one good way to put it is like this: we all have eyes, a nose, a mouth, and ears. It's just the way that they're placed together and their positioning differs from person to person. So, what I'm trying to get at is we all have the same and experience the same things. Just as you said, you had different people that all essentially were raised in the same manner as you, but each person's life experience is a little bit different. And
yeah.
that shifts the filters that we have on how we perceive our world, and has an impact on then how we move going forward, because we're always using those filters throughout our
Yeah.
life regardless. But at the end of the day, the framework is the same for everybody. Physiologically, we're all the same pretty much. Numbers might vary as to values of hormones or whatever the case may be. There's slight variances or variations, but at the end of the day, we're all the same. We're all capable of the same. Some of us just need a little more work. Some of us might need a little less work. You might have
Yeah.
someone that has the gene, the that is missing the myostatin. I think it's the myostatin gene, and so they're able to grow a lot of muscle mass really quickly. Whereas
Yeah.
someone else might not have any of that in their
Yeah.
genetic profiling, but through a lot of hard work and dedication, they could still get to a really, really good level. And so it's the whole concept that the framework is the same, but the experience is different. Um, Joseph Campbell, I think that's his name, Here with a Thousand Faces. And he talks about how the hero story throughout history follows this pattern, the same cyclical pattern, regardless of where the story originates from.
Yeah.
But each story is different. And that's no different than how we live our lives. It's the pattern is the same, but the actual journey we each undertake is different.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely something I should have included but didn't, is the whole nature versus nurture type thing. We also have vastly different experiences, even if you grow up in the same environment. The 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 lens that you're looking through might look a little different depending on the person based on their life experiences. Like you said, the senses are producing an image of reality in front of you, and what that person is seeing potentially is much different than what I'm seeing. And so um, yeah, it's definitely interesting stuff. I grew up Mormon myself, and then I kind of went through like an atheist phase or whatever. And it's interesting. I feel like people don't understand that we are the word spiritual is tricky, but we do crave spirituality, for lack of a better word, and we need it. And I would attribute it to, or not attribute it to. I would put it as kind of similar to, not to be vulgar, but like non-reproductive intercourse, right? Where it's something that doesn't really advance the species or whatever, but it does provide something for us. And it's hard to explain, like you said, like, oh, it reduces cortisol and blah blah blah, but it's much more than that, right? It's something that is at our very core, and if we don't get it, if we don't do it, it really causes problems. And I think that's what happens with spirituality, like, and just how people can go for a long time without having intercourse. um People can go for a long time without having spirituality, but it doesn't mean that it's healthy, right? It's we still It's just who we are, right? We're tribal, we're cultural, we're spiritual. And I think in the modern age, we've kind of forgotten that and we've pushed it aside. And I do blame Western science quite a bit for that. I think it's like, oh, you can't prove that, so why are you believing in this? Or there's limited evidence, and I'm just going to be this lover of science, and logic will be my god or
Yeah,
whatever.
the
But
false
I
nature
feel
of
that,
science. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I feel that that's not who we are, right? And it can be a paradox, like the rational mind and the spiritual mind, and they can be at conflict with each other. And me personally, I'm trying to figure out how to balance those two things. But hopefully I'll find an answer and figure it out, how those two things are always in conflict with each other. I think just accepting what I am is probably the first step, that I'm a spiritual creature, and go from there would be
always
my.
acceptance is always the primary thing.
Yeah.
To go back to your example, if you think about someone who eats junk food as part of their diet, they could go through a huge portion of their life
Yeah.
being undernourished but well fed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
And it'll manifest later on in life as metabolic issues, let's say.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is when it comes to spirituality, spiritual practices, is having a connection with something that is beyond you. Because let's put this a little more in perspective. If you were in charge of everything around you, and I mean everything, including hundreds of people,
Yeah.
that might be a little stressful, yeah? But
Very stressful.
if you were one of those people instead being led by, let's say, the village elder or the mayor or whoever that may be, and that person is a high trust person, like you know that they won't do any wrong, they won't steer you wrong, like everything is perfect with that person, so to speak. How much more can you then relax into that position?
Completely.
And that's
Like, yeah.
that's really a part of it. You know, people that'll go on throughout their spiritual walk, it's like there's nothing that they can really relax into because they don't believe, say if they're atheists, they don't really fully believe in a higher power, but
Yeah.
they also in a sense do relax because they believe in their science, that science will have
Yeah.
the answer. Yeah. So it's one of those things that you need to have that belief in something higher so you can truly relax and allow things to happen and manifest as they need to in your life.
Mm.
You know, there's still, of course, some work that everybody has to do. Like even with that, you still have to pull your own weight.
Yeah.
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 It's crucial to have that, especially for anybody that's endeavoring to go into any spiritual practices, because
Yeah.
without it, you end up being one of those guys that sleeps with everybody's wives, for example.
You're like, well, I'm going to take advantage of all these rubes
Yeah,
and take control of this commune here. Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that a lot. That's a good point. Like you can never truly relax until you accept that you're safe or whatever, right? And
right.
um, I think that's with a lot of these meditation practices and breathing and wellness, safety ends up being the the word of the day or whatever. Where if you're not safe, you're
Mhm.
not going to be able to feel spiritual. You're not going to be able to heal trauma. You're not going to be able to do any of that. And so, yeah, this belief in the higher power, where um, or the spiritual leader, or or the king or whatever, where you're going to be safe and you're going to be taken care of, is probably part of human nature and just something that we we evolved to need. You know.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's such a big role that if you don't have it, you fall into this pattern, and the only way to really break out of the pattern is to put your reliance in something like that. And
Yeah.
because unfortunately, what happens to most of us, and I mean, it's part of being human, unfortunately, is that we tend to not be able to see our blind spots as well. And so we end up cycling through the same process over and over. Like, have you ever met anybody that constantly in a new relationship, but tends to be the same kind of person every single time?
Yeah.
That's an exact like example. It's a perfect example of that, where you're looping through this process, but why? What is that you're not seeing in that moment so that you can break out of that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a quote in the Book of Mormon, actually, that talks about how he who trusteth in the arm of the flesh is cursed. So
Hmm.
it's basically like, if you rely on yourself, just your own willpower, or the willpower of man, you're not going to do too well.
Right.
And it's funny though, going back to my original point, this is the struggle that I have, is as a I don't know what I am. I don't think I'm an atheist, but as someone who acknowledges, the need for those things, but also wanting evidence behind it.
Right.
It's a real problem. It's a real paradox. And yeah, I'm writing a book on this, and when I find the answer, I'll let you know. But it it's tough, because I can kind of rely on that open placebo effect a little bit,
Right.
where I know it's necessary, but how long can I keep that up or whatever.
Well,
So
it's also not just a mental exercise. See, here's the thing, is a lot of this is also you have to experience, and the experience itself is the evidence for it.
yeah.
Because I could sit here and talk about, this is how you lift weights. This is how you do this movement. This is how you do this. Brace here, push here, lift here, grab this, think about this, focus on this. I can give you all these detailed things, but until you go and you pick up the bar for yourself and you lift it and have that experience, then that little bit of knowledge that you picked up from that experience is worth more than all the theory behind it that you could have
Yeah.
learned from anywhere else. So that's another thing that's kind of a jab in the side sometimes, is the experience itself is the evidence, but everybody's experience is slightly different because, once again, everybody's on a different journey. There's a lot of literature that's done by older masters, and you see that what they're saying just sounds so odd, and like you can't really conceptualize it, and you're like,
Yeah.
are they intentionally trying to hide something here? Like, what is
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
But it's not until you actually go through the process, because they usually lay out the process.
Yeah.
Not until you go through the process as if you're going through a science experiment, and you get that experience, that then you now understand what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Try to explain to someone that's never had alcohol what alcohol tastes like straight vodka. If you've never had vodka,
It's impossible.
you
Yeah.
don't know how to and you don't know what it tastes like. And even then, when you do taste it, it's hard to explain it to someone. You might say that it burns, but what is the taste? Well, it doesn't really have a taste. So is it like water? No, it's not like water. Well, then what is it like? So until you experience it for yourself, then that's what you could use as, this is what it is. That's the evidence. Now I know.
Yeah. Yeah. To put a Christian slant on that, it sounds like what you're talking about is almost like you're saved through your works. I know there's this big argument of saved through
Mhm.
works or saved through grace. I'm not really talking about that necessarily. I'm more
Right.
talking about in the temporal world, in the world we're in now, you're saved by your works, by actually doing the things and, creating that life
Mhm.
and experiencing those things. And yeah, another Jesus quote is um, by their fruits ye shall know them. I think that's what Jesus
Mhm.
was talking about too. It's if you do the experience and then you are happier and you accept those things, that's when it's right and it's good for you as a spiritual person. So
Right. Right. And he also mentioned, Jesus did also say to not be like the hypocrites who voice that, oh, look at me, I'm fasting and how righteous am I. It's like,
yeah,
just do your work. Don't brag about it. Do your fasts. Make it seem as if you're doing nothing.
yeah,
Because at the end of the day,
yeah.
it's not about garnishing attention, right? At the end of the day, it's about you yourself elevating yourself to a better state for the sake
Healing
of,
yourself.
yeah, for the sake of yourself, to have that
Yeah,
connection with the higher power, to go out and then be the light of the world.
yeah, yeah. Um, I read this book. I think it's called Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton, but it talks about
Mhm.
the differences between Western and Eastern priests and how they're depicted in artwork.
Mhm.
And he's a big proponent of Christianity. I'm definitely not pushing one side or the other, but I thought it
Right.
was interesting. He was talking about how the um, the Western priest has his eyes open and they're like bloodshot and he's stressed and he's like, oh,
Mhm.
I got to go out and fix the world. And whereas the Eastern priests, they have their eyes closed, they're calm, they're looking inwards, and they're like, well, let me focus on myself and then I'll focus on the rest of the world. Is that something that you feel is accurate with this Eastern orthodoxy where it's focus on yourself and then help others, or through helping others you'll find yourself?
If you and I are in the desert and we've been walking for a bit and you're really thirsty and you ask me for water, and I go and I reach for my canteen and realize that there's no water for me, how can I then help you as
Yeah,
well? So you need to ensure that you have enough for yourself, that you've taken care of yourself to be able to help others. Gandhi said it best when he said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world."
mm,
People underestimate, but think of it this way: everything you do has an effect on the world around you. If I go and I smile at someone and that brightens their day, that changes their attitude to how they treat all those people around them. Think of all the people around them, not just their family, but the people they interact with. Now think of those people around them and think of those people around them. Now take
yeah,
the example differently and say I cuss that person out instead. Now think about the same thing happening, rippling out through all those people. So
yeah.
to turn inward, to work on yourself, to clear yourself out, to become a better version of yourself, just with that presence alone and what you do is enough to really change the world. You don't have to do anything else.
I see. That's kind of the Eastern thought where, if you need to go to medical school or whatever first before you can start helping others. You can't just go out there and start, you know, cutting people open and say, "Hey, I'm here to help," or
Yeah,
whatever. But
exactly.
I mean, when I was a missionary in Japan, but that is kind of what the Western thought was, is that don't focus on yourself. That's a fool's game, because if you're focusing on yourself, you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to be stressed. How can I improve? Blah, blah, blah. But it's through serving others and saving
Mhm.
others, you will gain salvation, literally as well as figuratively. But
Yeah.
it's definitely a different way of thinking. And I can see both sides. I would say there's probably a happy medium where it's like, you can't focus on yourself too much without going out and helping people. Obviously, those Buddhist priests and things do a lot of good as well. But at the same time, if you just go out there and even with the best of intentions, with no training and
Mhm.
or whatever, you could definitely cause more harm than good, thinking you know how to help others.
Well, both work beautifully if you think about it, both from the Eastern and the Western perspective, because you do have to do that inner work to improve yourself. That
Yeah,
changes you, that changes how you carry yourself. But at the same time, if you look at it, like, for example, through the lens of Western Christianity that we were talking about, where they say don't focus on yourself, it's true, because at the same time, you're surrendering to something greater than yourself and allowing that to then, in essence, work
yeah,
through you. But
yeah,
if you work on yourself, that just means that it gets magnified that much more.
yeah. Yeah, no, there's definitely a balance. Like when I was in the so they do stick you in a missionary training center for 3 months before
Mhm.
they send you out there. That's definitely not enough. But they drop you in the middle of nowhere, and you're like, Godspeed, brother, and you have to learn the language and all this stuff, which is good because like you said, learning through experience is one of the best ways to do it. But
Right.
at the same time, it's definitely a little rough, and I don't think I was doing much good for the first few months while while I was out there, because it's just you just don't know anything. But
Yeah. Just like a baby. Think about the
yeah,
baby's first steps. I mean, how many times does a baby have to fall down before they can walk confidently
yeah,
and comfortably? Yeah. You just
yeah,
keep picking yourself up and you just keep going.
yeah, yeah. You have to. I think that's something I'm going to apply in my life a little bit more, balancing the Eastern and Western ideas, where for looking inward but also looking outward. Maybe I'll keep one eye open or something rather than the
Yeah. And hey,
to got
like,
both eyes closed
and if it ever
or
comes up
both
to
eyes
it,
open.
yeah, if it ever comes up to it, don't forget, I will have that online class ongoing that,
Oh yeah.
yeah, so it's, well, I was a little hesitant with how I wanted to title it, but realistically, it's going to be let that fill in the blank go. And really, it's just going to be focusing it's a short thing. It's less than an hour, but really, it's just going to be focusing on letting go. What is it that's bothering you right now? Let's get rid of that. And with
Yeah.
it, there'll be some tools and everything that we'll work through. So it's always open for you as well.
Oh, that'd be great. No, I'd love to look at that. It's funny how we cling to things, and I feel like it was an evolutionary holdover from when there were real dangers. There was a tiger in the bushes, and so you had to kind of always be a little stressed and worried that that guy was going to come get you. But now it's like we don't have those real dangers,
Right.
and so the mind comes up with things that are real but they're almost metaphysical, they're almost spiritual, and you can't defeat spiritual or metaphysical creatures in the physical world. You need to go into the spiritual world, find where it is, and
Hmm.
through things like your course, it's probably a good way to root it out. You
Yeah.
can't. You need a spiritual sword to slay a spiritual demon. Is kind of what I'm trying to say. Not to get too nerdy on you,
Right.
but
No, but to continue with the nerdiness, sometimes you need a Gandalf, or you also need to have a Merlin there,
yeah,
because at the same time, you need the guidance sometimes. Occasionally, that guidance is needed. Like, hey, I'm really stuck in this situation, and I don't know what to do. Oh, let me talk to this person. They can help me out, because now you have a different set of eyes. Before
yeah.
the advent of cell phones with cameras, if you wanted to work on your exercise form for any exercise, you needed to have a personal trainer that could really fine tune
Uh,
and tell you, oh yeah, you look, you're too loose here. Oh no, fix your feet this way. And now with cameras, of course, that's less necessary, but there's still a value in having them, because they can still help you tighten up where you can't see it with cameras.
yeah,
They also have that knowledge and know-how. So it's the same thing as this. Being a doctor of medical qigong, that's one of the things that I do too. Is people will come be like, you know what, I've had this problem for like a year now. What do I do? And it's like, well, let's look a little deeper and see what we can do. Oh, here's something that needs some working on. Let's look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. Sort it out. Have an expert there to help you out who's dealt with similar things in the past and has been able to root things out of people that they otherwise wouldn't be able to on their own.
Right. Exactly.
Sure. Well, I'm definitely going to put a link to your course in the description. It sounds super fascinating. And if anybody wants to go check out that, please do. I am learning more and more about Qigong, and the more I learn about it, the more I want to learn about it. So yeah, that's exciting. I'm definitely going to look into your course when it comes out. So please let me know.
Absolutely.
And yeah, is there anything particular that you wanted to end on? I know we talked a pretty wide range of things, but did I miss anything specific that you wanted to talk about?
The biggest thing really is that you are exactly where you need to be at this moment. That's it. You are where you need to be. Now go where you need to go.
I like that a lot. Yeah, be accepting of where you are in life, and where your past self has led you, and appreciate it. Is that a good summary as well?
Absolutely. And it's similar to what the Buddha said, where he said, if you want to know why you are where you are, look at your past. Your past is
Yeah,
what led you here. And if you want to know
yeah,
where you're going to be, look at where you are now. Because if you don't like where you're going to be based on where you are now, then you should change where you are now.
adapt and overcome.
But it all comes with knowing that you are where you are now, and that's okay.
I like that a lot. I'm probably gonna put that on a poster or something and put it on my wall. Maybe I'll get like the Chinese version of it underneath
Sure, I'd love to see it.
the proverb. Sounds good. Hey, well, thank you so much, Jose. This has been awesome.
Likewise.
Thank you for joining me, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. This is great.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye.